And now, ladies and gentlemen, presented by Kepler Infrastructure, our next program is special session number 2, Building Regional Interconnectivity. For our online viewers, this is the time in which you actually click to this next session to get yourselves prepared as well. Now, for this session, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite His Excellency, Dr. Senaba Supanabong, Deputy Minister for Energy and Mines, Lao People's Democratic Republic, to deliver this keynote address.
A very good morning, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I deem it a great honor to be invited to deliver the keynote address of the Singapore Energy Summit 2021. In this occasion, I'd like to take this opportunity to sincere thank to the Energy Market Authority for holding this important platform meeting where it will feature expert views and insight on the energy transformation in ASEAN, diving into the opportunities and challenges in energy investment, innovation, and integration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as in the region calls for partnership in dynamic development aimed to forge close economic integration within the region, especially to the energy and utilities sector, we see the importance of an efficient, reliable, and resilient electricity infrastructure in meeting the growing electricity demand, as well as the development of new and renewable energy resources. It is expected that the interconnected system will enhance electricity trade across borders, which will contribute toward energy security and enhance the economic prosperity amongst others. Honorable guests, Lao PDR is similar to other countries with population of less than 10 million people, socio-economic developments of which is mainly relied on the natural resources to accelerate economic growth and reduce poverty. Apart from our cultural and natural beauty of our country, which is appealing to foreign visitors, geologic feature of our country also bestow condition of hydroelectric power development. Currently, more than 10,000 megawatts of our estimate potential, almost 30,000 megawatts are developed and put into operation to contribute to national socio-economic development, and we can say that more than 90% of energy generation is primary from hydropower. Apart from hydropower resources, it has also significant potential of solar PV, wind, and biomass resources. For the cross-border power trade, we export electricity to our neighboring countries on the bilateral basis of Memorandum of Understanding or Energy Cooperation Agreement. We have agreed for exports 9,000 megawatts to Thailand, 9,000 megawatts to Vietnam, and 6,000 megawatts to Cambodia. We also undertake the feasibility study of power interconnection between Laos and Myanmar to export the power in beginning of 2022 and to increase to 300 megawatt in 2025. In addition, we are implementing the pilot project of the multilateral trading to export the power of 300 megawatt to Malaysia through Thailand's existing interconnection, or we call LTM Power Integration Project. This project is a good showcase of ASEAN's solidarity and a cornerstone to realizing the APG initiative. Extraordinary, we are currently negotiating to export of clean energy, approximately 100 megawatts, to Singapore via Thailand and Malaysia, where EDL has engaged the partner in Singapore. This will be an important step to export power through two countries to promote the development of clean energy expected to commence in early 2022. These are success of hydropower development contribute in reducing the use of fossil fuel generation from neighboring countries. To further enhance the performance of export sector in increasing electricity supplies, the government also planned to install 48 more electricity transmission lines. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an increasing need for the international collaboration to achieve the clean energy transition, such as through regional grids and partnerships in research and development. At the same time, we will need to continue to ensure the reliability, affordability, and environmental sustainability of our energy supply. Hence, I appreciate EMA for organizing this forum. I personally see this forum as a good platform to promote greater understanding on the concept of electricity trading and interconnection in region, its challenges, opportunities, and options, and to forge energy cooperation between the public and private sectors from the region. To this end, on behalf of Ministry of Energy and Mines of Laos, I wish everyone for happiness, healthy, and stay safe from COVID pandemic. I very much look forward to meet you all soon after COVID-19. Khop Chai, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Our next keynote address, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Amida Salsia Alice Jabana, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Secretary of ESCAP. Your Excellency, please.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to speak to you today at the Singapore International Energy Week on the building regional interconnectivity. Power system connectivity is a key means for supporting the energy transition by enabling access to lower cost resources, increase integration of renewable energy, and improve energy security. There are many efforts across Asia to increase regional power system integration and enable multilateral power trade. In Southeast Asia, for example, there is an effort to create a fully integrated ASEAN power grid. The recently expanded Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, or LTMS Power Integration Project, and the proposed ASEAN-Australia Power Link, to name just a few. The ambition of these efforts is evidence that many stakeholders already see the value of increased regional interconnectivity. Yet, progress on regional power system connectivity in the Asia-Pacific remains limited. The vast majority of cross-border power trading is bilateral. The LTMS power trade is a notable step forward towards full multilateral trading. Still in the region, we have not yet seen the development of regional power exchanges like the ones in Europe or Africa. There are a few reasons for this. There are political barriers to increase integration. Countries often link together energy sovereignty and energy security, and so may see increased regional integration as being in opposition to those goals. Policymakers and other stakeholders must ensure that power system connectivity and renewable energy deployment are tied together so that one can support the other. There are also financial barriers to integration. Cross-border power infrastructure, typically high-voltage transmission lines, can be expensive to build, and the benefits of increased integration spread across multiple countries. This practice can make it hard to agree on sharing development costs or raise concerns over the cross-border implications of loan defaults. There are institutional gaps. While many regional institutions are in place in Southeast Asia and other parts of the region to support collaboration, they often do not have the capacity to perform the analytical and technical work required to design and implement complex projects. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, ESCAP has been promoting cooperation on connectivity among member states. We are supporting increased regional power system integration in several different ways. For example, we are organizing training for regulators, including the ASEAN Energy Regulatory Network and utilities for the heads of the ASEAN power utilities and authorities. We are analyzing the potential for green power corridors, which links increased interconnectivity to national policy goals to support sustainable development in Northeast Asia. We are bringing stakeholders from the region together through our expert working group on energy connectivity and our leadership of the Global Grid Initiative's Asia-Pacific Working Group, which will be officially launched next week at COP26. All of this work is guided by the Regional Roadmap on Power System Connectivity, which the member states endorsed earlier this year. The roadmap contains strategies to promote cross-border electricity connectivity for sustainable development. It is a clear sign that governments across the Asia-Pacific region recognize the benefits of increased power system connectivity. Power system connectivity can bring real benefits. It can support efforts by countries like Singapore and Bangladesh with limited domestic renewable energy potential to decarbonize their power sectors and create economic opportunities for countries like Laos PDR and Nepal, which can export green electricity to the region. ESCAP is committed to supporting your efforts to build a more sustainable, more connected future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next panel explores solutions for advancing the energy transition through increasing cross-border power trade via the regional power grids. I would now like to invite our panelists on stage and, of course, on screen. We firstly have Ms. Cindy Lim, Chief Executive Officer, Kepler Infrastructure, Ms. Mary Burrs-Wallick, Deputy Executive Director, International Energy Agency, Mr. Denif Danusaputro, who's joining us virtually, Chief Executive Officer, PT Pertamina Power Indonesia, Mr. Jimmy Koo, Chief Executive Officer, SP Power Grid Limited, and moderating this session, ladies and gentlemen, is Chairman Energy and Utilities, Business Committee, British Chamber of Commerce, Singapore, Tim Rockwell. Tim, good to see you again.
Thank you very much, Ravi, and I'm sure your feet will be shuffling as usual at the sidelines when time is up. Thank you, everybody, for staying with us and for everyone who's connected online. It's very exciting again to be here, live at Marina Bay Sands, talking to people on the sidelines. Absolutely fantastic conference once again. And congratulations to Vasu on the theme, Advancing the Energy Transition. We've got a fantastic panel, and I'll ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their organization. I'm sure some you will have already heard of course, like International Energy Agency probably doesn't need any introduction, but it'd be good to know exactly what you're doing. And to Danif up there from Pertamina Power International. I think you're dialing in from your car, Danif, so thank you very much for joining us. Absolute pleasure, but just shows you how connected the world is today, right? You know, you're mobile, you're in a different country, and you're broadcasting to the world on this conference. So we're looking forward to hearing from Pertamina as well. But I'll stop talking in a minute because we're going to let the panelists speak. This event is around building interconnectivity. And what do we mean by interconnectivity? It's physical, but it's also trade. And it's not just trade of molecules and electrons, but also trade of renewable energy certificates. And we heard a lot this morning about what the region wants to do in terms of getting more renewables into the system, stabilizing grids. And I guess there's going to be some trade-offs. And I'm going to turn to Mary Burse-Warlick. Mary, you're Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency, which is one of the partners of SU. And you've got tremendous experience, of course, from the State Department. But perhaps you can tell us as well just a little bit about the role of how government should be working with the private sector, particularly around interconnectivity, and what that might mean around trade-offs between resilience, security, getting more green electrons into the system, and of course, affordability, which is a big word right now. So over to you, Mary. And if you give us a little introduction about yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be with all of you today. Yes, my name is Mary Warlick, and I'm the Deputy Executive Director at the International Energy Agency based in Paris. I just joined the IEA in late May of this year, so I've been there just a few months. And the IEA has been very much engaged in lots of important work related to the energy transition. So it's a real pleasure to be with you here in Sioux this year. And I'm so delighted to see this focus in particular on building regional interconnectivity, which is, I think, going to be and is an increasingly important component related to the energy transition as well. So it's been very encouraging to hear today about some of the developments in that regard, and look forward to hearing more about them too from our panelists. But just going to your question, I think there's no question that there needs to be a very strong relationship between industries and government. It's a very important aspect of developing a well-functioning, interconnected power system, no question. And it's also important, I think, as these systems are being developed, that we understand that that they need to take place in the context or coupled with broader power sector developments as well. And this relates to investments in and considerations with regard to the grids, further investments in renewable energy development and deployment, and of course, regulatory strengthening as well. I would like to mention that the IEA has been working very closely with ASEAN very specifically on this subject of interconnections and power trade. In fact, at the in connection with an ASEAN Energy Ministerial meeting in 2019, the IEA issued a study very specifically on establishing multilateral power trade, and it had a particular focus on the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia project, now the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore project. So very pleased to have Singapore's involvement in that and to see that things are going to be moving forward somewhat next year. That's all very encouraging news. With respect to just very briefly on the kind of security issues, if I understood correctly, I do think that as the these interconnections move forward, that they can contribute very positively, actually, to a longer term, more integrated, more resilient set of systems. Of course, it's important that, as I mentioned earlier, that the regulatory and policy issues are in place to help guide and oversee those kinds of issues. There are always concerns, as you know, in any energy system with regard to physical disruptions from any number of threats, potential cyber risks, which we've certainly seen, and sort of broader energy security risks. And of course, as countries begin to think about working together and they're sort of become more reliant on their neighbors, those are all considerations to taken into account as part of the discussions in the negotiations. I will say, though, on balance, as things move forward, I do think that, as I mentioned, that regional interconnections and electricity balancing can actually enable a more efficient and more secure integration of variable renewable energy sources and make systems more resilient and reliant in the long term.
Thank you, Mary. And I think I'll come back to you in a minute about how you make this work in ASEAN, whether it's bilateral, multilateral, because let's face it, ASEAN is not the European Union or the federal United States. So it'd be very interesting to get your views on that. But I'm adopting a ladies first approach to this panel, and I'm going to turn to Cindy Lim now. So Cindy, you're Chief Executive of Kepler Infrastructure. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what Kepler Infrastructure does for the benefit of people worldwide. And then also kind of Kepler's role in interconnectivity. And how do you see this working between governments and the private sector? Because, bearing in mind that aim of resilience, but also affordability as well.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Kepler Infrastructure. Kepler Infrastructure is a wholly owned subsidiary of Kepler Corp. And in Kepler Infrastructure, we organize our businesses in power and renewable, environment, which covers waste and water solution, as well as new energy. In new energy, we look into electrification such as EV charging, district cooling, and last but not least, potential energy innovation in carbon-free hydrogen and CCUS. To Tim's question about regional grid and importation of power, what happened is we all know Singapore is a renewable disadvantaged country. Whereas if you look at the region in ASEAN, there are vast potential for low carbon and renewable generation. And we are very privileged, Kepler Infrastructure is very privileged to be appointed as a preferred importer for the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project trials. It's a 2-year trial of up to 100 megawatt of hydropower. Now, in participating in this trial, we also signed an exclusive framework agreement with EDL to explore further development of renewable potential in Laos for the greater ASEAN region. This includes certifying, verifying, as well as monitoring and tracking of renewable energy certificate. We feel very strongly that the power trade cross-border is one of the catalysts to propel the region's acceleration towards a low carbon energy future.
Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Danif now. So Danif, before we lose you, because I know that you're traveling, hopefully you can hear us fine. Welcome, and it's great that you can join us. Perhaps you could start off, I mean, most people will know Pertamina. They imagine it's an oil and gas company, but you're the chief executive of Pertamina Power International. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit about the aims of that company, and then talk a little bit about the interconnectivity across Indonesia. That would be interesting, because I'm sure you've got lots of experience joining up your archipelago, but still more work to do. And then I'll come on to kind of what's your ambitions around getting more renewable energy into the grid, but also for export to other countries in ASEAN. So a whole bunch of questions there, but I want to pose them to you just in case the connection drops off. But maybe you start a little bit just around Pertamina Power, please.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can.
Yes, Pertamina Power New and Renewable Energy is one of the subholding that Pertamina created, right? Is basically to transition Pertamina from oil and gas company into an energy company with less carbon footprint. So we understand that Pertamina main business will be disrupted with the electric vehicles, and people will less buying ICE cars or whatnot, right? So we in Pertamina, basically we are transitioning into energy company with less carbon emissions. So regarding the interconnectivities of electricity or power, right? In Indonesia, as you all know, that Indonesia is an archipelago. There are still a lot work needs to be done, Tim, in Indonesia for the interconnectivities. But you know, Pertamina as one of the SOE, big SOE, we are working together with ESDM and also PLN as the National Electricity Company of Indonesia on how to address this interconnectivity between islands or whatnot. I believe there are works that will be our regulations related to power wheeling, power swapping that would help the interconnectivity of Indonesian islands. But the most I guess exciting for me, especially under Pertamina Power New Energy, is to opportunities, right? To create supplies and to export that supply of power into neighboring countries, which we have worked together with ESDM as regulators. That is something that it can be done, right? And PLN as the national electricity company that pretty much earn and govern all the transmission distributions of electricity in Indonesia. In the latest REPTL, is basically the electricity supply planning. Smart grid is one of the key I guess initiatives that will be done by PLN, right, for the next 5 years. And I can tell you basically there will be a major framework reform, right, in order to make sure that electricity, the energy and electricity, in particularly securities, right, can provide affordable energy, accessible for all Indonesian residents, and also acceptabilities. And most important is basically the security of providing that energy.
Thanks. And Danif, can you just give us a little bit about
several of your questions?
Yeah, maybe just add on a little bit about the ambitions of Pertamina Power. Kind of where are you today, and where do you want to get to? That would be really interesting to understand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we have a lofty goals or lofty mandate as well, right? From Pertamina Group and also from the government. Obviously, we are 100% owned Pertamina, our holding company, right? 100% owned by the government. We are here to support the Indonesian grand energy strategy, the national grand energy strategy. So our ambition is basically we only do pretty much renewables energy sources or supply of projects. Hence, our goal is basically to be able, right, to produce at least 10 gigawatt in the next 5 years, right? And predominantly, this is, if not all, is all coming from renewable sources. So
okay.
This is in line, yeah, with REPTL, which is
That's good to know, and hopefully we can see some of those green electrons moving around the region at some stage. Thank you. If you can stay with us, but I'm going to move on now to Jimmy. So Jimmy Koo from SP Power Grid. Perhaps you can tell us, Jimmy, first of all, kind of what is SP Power Grid? I know the title's in the name, actually, but in Singapore, we don't see many grids because they're all underground. But perhaps you can just explain a little bit about kind of what your day-to-day role is. And then this interaction between industry and government. I guess SP sits somewhere in the middle as well, right? So there's that dilemma as to kind of, are you leading or kind of, are you taking direction? But what's the ambition of SP Power Grid in terms of getting more green electrons into the system in Singapore from ASEAN?
Thank you, Tim. First, a bit about SP Group. The power grid is actually a key part of the group. Of course, we are the national transporter for gas and electricity, right? Both transmission and distribution. So in the energy transition, the power grid is a key enabler in order to move electrons from one place to another, be it solar or charging electric vehicles. The grid plays a very big role as far as enabling the national plans for sustainability. And within the group, there are also a few other subsidiaries, each where we are pursuing sustainability solutions, because to your question about how we would like to be, we really want to lead change and support the energy transition. So in this group, there are various capabilities. For example, district cooling, which is similar to Kepler. In fact, this building Marina Bay Sands is being served by a district cooling network. The DSG is the largest underground district cooling network in the world. Like Cindy said, it has significant energy saving. Here we see about 40%. So big part saving energy through air conditioning. Then we are active in enabling mobility. That's a big part, electrification of transport. That's a big carbon emitter. So in Singapore, we are currently the largest EV infrastructure provider, more than 400 charging points already, and we'll continue to invest in order to support the electrification of the transportation. In another group, we have a digital capability where we are providing solutions for commercial buildings, industry, and so in the company itself, so lots of activity is enabling the green transition. Now, on the question of the governments and industry, I think this is as a grid operator, we work very closely with government in general. So today, Singapore has one of the most reliable power grids in the world, and this is because of the close collaboration between the company and the regulators, in planning, in operations, and in discussing possibilities, in the future as well. So today, the relationship is very strong, and that has led to some globally respectable outcomes. Now, in going forward with interconnects and all the green solutions, this requires even more collaboration with government, because the interconnection is actually very complex technically in terms of governments. Mary mentioned additional risks. How do we manage it? So therefore, we think this collaborative spirit between government and power grid and other industry infrastructure providers needs to continue. Because you need to ensure the reliability, you need to make sure that it is not at great expense to consumers, right? While you're enabling the green energy. So all 3 points of the Singapore's trilemma, right, has to be dealt with, and it is paramount that we work closely with government. Therefore, it is a must-do thing.
Great, thanks. Now, I'm going to come back to you, Mary, on that question I asked you earlier about how do you make this work? I mean, I know the IEA is not prescriptive, but from your experience, the State Department, do you need an independent system operator to run this? Can it done bilaterally between governments or multilaterally? Or is it like a supranational group in ASEAN that's required to make this work, a bit like the European Union, for instance? Have you got any suggestions on that? And as best as you can talk from being Deputy Executive Director of the International Energy Agency?
Well, I really would not want to be prescriptive about how
sure.
ASEAN countries work amongst themselves, but I think that there is no question that there's an important role both for national governments to play as well as for regulators across the region. And I will mention that the IEA actually has been working quite closely with the ASEAN Energy Regulatory Network for some time to help them understand and develop the role of regulators in the regional space and in the context of regional integration. So that is some work that is ongoing. And we are also launching a capacity building plan for this organization as well to kind of facilitate peer-to-peer learning among regulators in the region. So I think that that is really important too, that national regulators and countries are open to learning from each other as they're setting new rules that will hopefully benefit all of them, in a mutual way. I think it's also important that we bear in mind that the energy space is by no means one, simply for governments and government entities, right? As we've just been hearing, there's a huge role for the private sector from colleagues who are right here on the panel. And so as these rules are developed, I think it's important that they participate in the process as well. We want to ensure that the regulations and tariffs and so forth being put in place are going to be a winning proposition for the private sector as well, to hopefully then build upon, and make some progress on the energy transition goals that all countries have here. So I know that's not a necessarily straightforward answer, but it's, I think, the correct one. And this issue of cooperation is just going to be fundamentally important going forward.
No, thank you for that answer as you can give it. And I think that's one of the benefits from the IEA being involved in Singapore is the kind of the sharing, because it's not a copy-paste approach. They're kind of learning from what's gone wrong in different locations as well. So that sharing, I think, is very important. Thank you very much. I want to move to Cindy now. So Cindy, you've got lots of customers, of course, as Keppel, but what demand is there kind of in the downstream from industrial users, not just for green electrons, but for renewable energy certificates? Because one of the things that interconnectivity is going to give us, hopefully, is more green electrons, but also we can trade more energy certificates. And, we spoke a little bit before about the RE100 and kind of their approach. But first of all, what demand are you seeing from customers for green electrons or mitigating where they can't get those electrons?
Thanks, Tim. Yep. In our business, we do deal with quite a large base of commercial and industrial customer, besides household customer as well. So at the core phase of what we are seeing, there are increasing demand for more sustainable energy in the form of renewable or low carbon energy. So certainly in a renewable constrained market, the next best alternative is really renewable energy certificate, or RECs for short. So on the demand side, certainly we see increasing demand. And on the industry player side, we do see willingness and desire to cooperate to create RECs to be traded cross-border. For example, recently we signed a MOU to exclusively collaborate with BCPG, one of the leading renewable energy player in Thailand, to develop renewable energy projects as well as to generate REC for the purpose of facilitating cross-border REC trade. So in terms of willingness of ecosystem partner to come together to collaborate, it is also there. Now, what is the constraint? Is it technology? Of course not. We know technology to enable tracking, verification, and remote monitoring of REC is there, whether it's blockchain, whether it is remote drone monitoring. So if it is not demand, if it is not lack of collaboration, or if it's not lack of technology, what could it be? I kind of like think it could be because of the lack of central and clear mechanism, and there is a wariness of reg arbitrage across border. So I don't have a clear solution why, or clear answer why is there no proliferation or liquidity of regs cross border. Maybe Tim, you have experience or observation you see in Nordic or EU countries that you want to share?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm supposed to be the moderator, but I'll kind of give my view, actually. I think the region needs to adopt a kind of country first, ASEAN second, Asia third, then rest of the world when it comes to certificates and trading. I think all too often now it's easy for companies to, say, particularly in Singapore where there's not enough green electrons, and just offset them with the cheapest credits that they can get, which I don't think benefits the region and certainly doesn't help grow renewable energy in the region. So thanks for throwing that one back, Cindy. I think that's really kind of you. Let me just ask Danif. So Danif, in Indonesia, are you seeing demand from the downstream, from industry, for green electrons, for mitigation? What are you seeing in Indonesia? I mean, the biggest country in ASEAN by population, by industry. What is the demand for green electrons, and how do you see connectivity helping if there is a big demand?
Okay, yeah, it's pretty much the same, right? First on the commercial and industrials, more and more companies, even local companies, right? Obviously the MNC already adopt this renewable energy sources. Even the local companies are start or asking or demanding renewable energy sources. I mean, obviously there was the stage where they want to get saving, but more and more is beyond that, beyond saving. They just want to do the right things, or this is pressure from their shareholders or the creditors, right? But they also, we will see the pickup from retails where, ESDM just passed regulations to push for retail household to be able to export the excess, I guess, just probably coming from the solar rooftop, right, to PLN. So this is to encourage people to install more solar rooftop. So we can see that basically this is a point of no return, right? And Indonesia penetration of renewable energy is still very low, right? Even on the CNI and also retails, there are many more opportunity, especially on the commercial and obviously on the utility side, right? As you know, PLN is the renewable energy sources is still on the low side compared to others.
Thank you very much. And Jimmy, I don't know if you've got any observations from SP about kind of voluntary markets and the actual take-up. I was having conversations over lunch where people were saying, actually, if you offer it to consumers, they just don't take up on the whole, very low take-up, even if it's a relative, in terms of offsetting emissions. I mean, just briefly, I mean, we've got to talk about interconnectivity, but are you seeing much demand from what you see in the Singapore market for green or mitigation?
I agree with you about starting locally first before you talk about the region, right? So there is a behavior that needs to change, that you want to be part of this movement to save the planet, right? This, I think, might take time, right? So awareness mechanisms. So what we have done is, as a group, we have made our app available in our app where you check your energy consumption. So you can choose to buy racks of the SPM, and of course, today a large part of the Singapore population pays their bills through SP, and through the same platform now you can actually choose to buy racks off, so that this is part and parcel of the trying. Do
people actually choose, or do they just like looking at the app?
It's slowly increasing. In fact, I asked for some statistics. This is not Singapore Power, but actually, contrary to what is in what was suggested, actually, in the region, including China, we have like 20% of IREX registered in the area. So it's not exactly small in terms of supply side. 15% from China, but generally in the region, almost 20%. So on the supply side, there are numbers. Now, on demand side, this is where I guess awareness that this is possible needs to be the education, right? In fact, I heard earlier Hong Kong was talking about education program about changing culture, right? So this is something that needs to be done in parallel. Even if we solved all that we are talking about imports and all this, is the supply side. The demand side, there's also needs to be a parallel movement.
Cool. Okay, we're getting towards the end of the session now, and I'm going to give everyone a chance to give a final statement. But before we do that, I just want to talk a little bit about innovation. Have we missed anything, Cindy? Is there any innovation out there that you're aware of and you can't implement, or innovation that you see on the horizon, which is going to enable more interconnectivity from a either technical point of view or even a business model point of view?
Well, I think, Tim, you hit the nail on its head. Actually, I think one of the biggest enabler or catalyst to energy transition acceleration is truly innovation. And it is not just innovation at the product and the service level, but truly is innovation at the business model level. How do we really create value beyond the conventional model, and how do we extend the value chain of play? One thing to note is in the power sector, we have always been managing diversification of fuel source or primary energy sources as a means to harden and provide resilience to the downstream user. So whether it is from solid fuel in the past, biomass or coal, to liquid like diesel and oil, to gas, and now potentially renewable, diversification of sources are one side of the same coin. The other side of the coin is really what has changed is the way people consume and demand electricity and power and energy has changed. What caused this change? Two massive movements, one being digitalization, the other being urbanization. So as a result, how people consume and demand for power is a function of a scenario base. It's no more that of conventional utility, centralized supply and centralized distribution and transmission. So I think in terms of innovation, I am very optimistic of enablers such as distributed smart grids, very agile and responsive demand management, even down to prosumer, whereby you have rampant EVs being able to even do vehicle to grid. And so I'm, like I said, technological optimist.
Very good. I'm going to move to closing comments now. Cindy, was there anything I've missed? Anything that you were burning to say that I didn't ask you or you wanted just to leave behind? Probably in about 30 seconds, if that's okay.
Yes, I think the bedrock of the power sector or the energy sector has always been to power improvement in livelihood and living environment. So in all the earnestness to race you towards net zero, I think we have to also be mindful about humanizing the transition such that we don't inevitably, number one, dislocate sectors or displace sector. Number two, leave behind stranded assets where investment and jobs are contingent upon. And number three, not to leave any part of the workforce behind as we transit into a greener and a low carbon energy future.
I think that's a good point, particularly energy access. I was looking at my numbers again, sort of fell off my chair. International Energy Agency numbers on energy access in ASEAN is very surprisingly high. I'm going to go to Danif, and then I'll go to Jimmy, and I'll give the last word to Mary. But you can see the clock ticking down there. I was going to give you a minute each, and maybe I might be able to give you a minute, but aim for 30 seconds, and it'll probably take a minute. But Danif, any closing thoughts around how do we make this work? What's needed? Anything short-term, long-term?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess, for us, as Cindy already mentioned, so many of those, Indonesia has a lot of resources or reserve of renewable energy. Now, how can we leapfrog, right, with the technology? This is predominantly on distribution and transmissions, right? If there is such technology that can leapfrog, not using cables or whatnot, right, that will make the utilizations of the reserve and resource of our renewable energy, name it geothermal, hydro, even solar, right? That can could become potential sources of renewable energy, not only for Indonesia as an archipelago, but also for the region. Thank you.
Very good. No, thank you, Danif, and thanks for bearing with us in the back of the car there. So we really appreciate that. Jimmy, over to you. Closing comments and anything I haven't asked you, which you were burning to say.
Minister Tan Siling's comment this morning about doing a collective goal, right? Collective goal to save the planet, the collective responsibility to save the planet. And this requires government, consumers, industry, and to Padanif, with collaboration within countries, right? Because when you come together as a larger collective, you will find solutions. And I believe that across the board, from the last person all the way to country level, between countries, there are opportunity to find win-win solutions, right? Where we will all be able to solve the climate change problem and still manage the cost, manage the reliability. So coming together, common goal, common effort.
Thanks. And Mary, last word to you. I mean, I don't think we're on the first step of this journey. In my mind, I think we're kind of jogging along quite nicely. People might disagree, but I think it's important to remember, Singapore moved to gas 20 years ago. I don't think it gets much credit for having done that, but it did. It's not burning coal, but in my mind, that's decarbonisation. We heard this morning about how important gas is. But given that we're jogging, do we need to get to a full sprint, and how quickly can we do that? And maybe you could answer that, and then give us your final thoughts around regional interconnectivity and how you see the IEA helping ASEAN with that.
Right. Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. It needs to be a sprint if we want to get to where many countries want to be by 2050 in terms of net zero goals. There's no question. And this is an important component of it, definitely. But I'm so encouraged by what I'm hearing about the progress being made in terms of regional interconnectivity in ASEAN. And I think that there's huge potential still. We're sort of in some respects at early stages, but I think at a really dynamic and important time. So great to hear about how things are beginning to move forward. And I would just underscore one of my previous points, which is I think as things move forward, we have to remember that the development of regional grids requires also attention to a variety of regulatory, financing, and other issues that will ensure that there's continued investment and commitment to regional integration and to further investment in new clean energy sources going forward. So thank you again.
No, thank you. Absolute pleasure to run this panel on behalf of the British Chamber of Commerce. We've done a huge body of work in the region. It's all available on our website, YouTube. You can read all about the stuff we've done. So very, very keen to kind of, be part of the conversation here in Singapore and ASEAN and the wider world. So once again, appreciate that. I didn't hear your feet shuffling, Rafi, and that was usually my cue to wrap up, so apologies for blowing the time. But perhaps everybody in the room could just give a huge round of applause to the panel. Really appreciate that. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tim, for moderating that session. Let's give Tim a round of applause as well, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.